Are you on the audition track or teaching an excerpt class this year? Well, for me personally, when I left the university, I was basically on my own when it came to preparing excerpts and developing my routine. Maybe you don't have the luxury of weekly lessons with a coach anymore. Well, Vlatuti has you covered.
Yes, at vlatuti.com, you can find a new and incredibly thorough resource for violists called Exploring Excerpts. It's a violist guide to building skills for orchestral playing. This is by former Rochester Philharmonic's principal violist, Melissa Matson, and based on her experience of teaching excerpt class at the Eastman School of Music and listening, of course, to countless professional auditions, Melissa has created etudes and exercises to help you work through tricky passages in new and creative ways. And before Melissa's book was released, I actually was fortunate enough to get a sneak peek of Beethoven 5, and it is truly amazing. One of the most fun parts, I think, is that you can enlist your friends who maybe are also auditioning, and you can each play parts and trade them off.
Oh, perfect for excerpt class.
Yeah, wouldn't that be fun?
And if you're not a violist, you can find Ralph Sciano's book, Behind the Screen, which is a detailed look at the winning strategies behind his path to becoming the principal clarinet of the Detroit Symphony. While there may not be a magical formula for audition prep that works for everyone, this book will give you ideas to help you approach your preparation with structure and creativity. It's a must-have resource for any aspiring orchestral musician.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that auditioning it's truly hit or miss, but nothing beats the confidence that comes from feeling prepared. Grab some of these resources to support your audition journey from vlatuti.com, VLATUTTI.com. Hey everybody, welcome back to part 2 of our episode with trombonist Ernest Stewart. Just wanted to let you know, if you are tuning in for the first time and you may have missed it, this is the second half of a conversation that we had with Ernest. You can find the first half of the conversation on the feed just below or just prior. I don't know how it's listed on your particular listening device, but you get the idea. So we hope you enjoy the second half of this conversation with Ernest Stewart.
Welcome to the Musician-Centric Podcast. We are two freelance violists living and laughing our way through conversations that explore what it means to be a professional musician in today's world. I'm Steph.
And I'm Liz. And we're so glad you've joined us. Let's dive in.
Honestly, I think you have to trick yourself sometimes into taking in new information. Even if it's listening to music that you don't like, that's new. I see people kind of get into their bag, and I have friends that I went to high school with that drive around listening to the music that was popular when they were in high school. And it's like very comforting. You know all the words to the song, and it's amazing, you know, that there is now a station dedicated to music from the early 2000s. But
that's classic rock now.
Yeah. It's like oldies now somehow.
Classic rock.
Yeah.
The oldest.
But I think that comfort is what kind of scares the hell out of me, because
I know.
I'm like, it's so comfortable and it lures you in, and you have to fight that urge sometimes and just sort of sit in a new area somewhere, or else you start to lose your neuroplasticity and you just get, I think it's important to just keep learning and keep putting yourself in these sort of uncomfortable situations and grow in those situations.
Yeah.
Or the wrong ones. And listen, you can learn a lot from the wrong situations.
I can say,
you know what, that's true.
What? In any facet of life, I can honestly say putting yourself in the wrong situation often teaches some big lessons.
Well, there's so much, like you said, Ernest, there's so much comfort seeking in music, and it's fine. I have days like that too, where all I want to listen to is stuff that I already know. If you're an artist, though, I think one of your biggest obligation duties in order to keep growing is to put yourself and listen to things that are not comfortable for you. And if they're not comfortable, you'd be like, okay, why is this not comfortable? And really self-examination and letting yourself, just like in regular life, processing feelings, let yourself process that and sit in the discomfort of it and figure out, why is this? Okay, then you might learn something new about what you like, what you don't like, where your growth areas are. And music listening, I think, can be like that too.
And, I don't expect people to listen to anything I'm saying right now about this. But the reality is that I feel like my taste, it's like I can use Spotify as a crutch or a tool. And I choose to use it as a tool.
That's fair.
To broaden.
That's cool. Yeah.
If you have all the music at your fingertips, like, who knows what's out there that you can connect with that has nothing to do with the stuff you grew up listening to and all. Like, it could be completely, it could be early blues or early country that's like folk music that you, like an album that you stumble across, or that you hear a snippet of it somewhere and you Shazam it and download the album, and you're just like, this is incredible. I love doing stuff like that. I do that all the time. And as a result, I get this really wide sort of recommendations from Spotify, where they're not just sending me this one thing, they're sending me stuff from all over the place.
Right. Okay. I can do this myself, is what you're saying.
Well, I mean, it's like, if you don't think about it, then you kind of just fall into that thing, or listening to music just for like your next gig and not really listening to other things. I'm really bad at going out to see concerts. I'm terrible at that. And I need to spend way more time going out to see concerts.
Did you guys have a recital requirement? You were in?
The pink slips. Remember the pink slips?
Yes.
Yeah.
You had to get it stamped or punched or whatever.
Just go to all my friends.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but you don't realize
how meaningful that is. Yeah.
How meaningful it is, and how you wished, like, at this stage in my life, I had a recital requirement. Because you're required once a month at least to go to a concert that you're not performing in, just to broaden your horizons. And it could be anything. Yeah. Like, it could be
100%.
You could set this for yourself. I'll make cards, and we'll distribute them.
Recital requirements.
Yes, recital requirements.
I love challenges like that for yourself, like forcing yourself to do certain things, to like grow in that way. It's amazing. When you can force yourself into that stuff, it's great. I have to remember that, because I spent so much time in these casual listening environments, like going to jazz clubs,
jam sessions,
like every single night. You forget that, if there's shows that happen in ticketed places, and you have to sometimes pay a ticket to go in to see a show, and are a ton of artists that you love listening to. It's crazy to me that I've never been to a James Blake concert. And I love listening to James Blake, but it's wild that I've, like, over the years since I first discovered him, like over 10 years ago, I haven't gone to a single James Blake concert. So I'm definitely going to get to a point where I'm trying to rectify these terrible errors of judgment that I've displayed.
Growth areas, Ernest.
Growth areas. Yes.
Growth areas. That's right. That's the reframe. Yeah. Located in a historic mansion in Tacoma Park, Maryland, you might get the impression that the team at Potter Violins are as formal as the breathtaking building that they work in. But when you go inside, instead you'll find the most relatable, skilled, and friendly staff.
Yes, the people at Potter's are what really make it a special place. I love visiting because I know that whoever I work with is not going to make me feel like I'm crazy or just being picky. They're kind of like your favorite bartender. They're great listeners who give you what you need without judgment.
Yes, their technicians are not only super talented, creative, and resourceful, they take the time to collaborate with you so that the process of getting your instrument at its best really feels like a partnership.
So if you're in the area, definitely stop by and introduce yourself to Chris, Rob, Kimberly, Derek, Jim, Melissa, and the whole team, or visit potterviolins.com to find what you need online.
It's so fitting then that their shop is in this beautiful old house, because the staff at Potter's really makes it feel like home. So I want to ask you, this is a little bit of a pivot to the conversation related to jazz, but when you came to visit, it was like almost 2 years ago now, and we were talking about this little seed of an idea of a project you had that I'm curious to know if you've developed that project idea at all, but also more importantly, like the theme behind the project idea, which was that you wanted to take all this media you'd been learning, photography, go into video, and your knowledge of music, and just start trying to figure out a way to document the lives and the legacies of jazz legends that we're losing over time here. And I'm curious to know how that thought maybe has developed for you, or if you want to share with people your thoughts about it to begin with, because I think it is actually really important.
Well, during the pandemic, we lost a lot of incredible artists, older musicians, older jazz musicians that unfortunately during that time, we didn't have many opportunities to celebrate their lives after their lives were lost. And because there was just rules then, and we were locked down and we just couldn't. So it becomes someone's duty, I think, to begin to think critically about the field and what are we seeing out there. It's like, man, I used to spend hours on the phone with some of them and they would tell me all of these stories about growing up in Philly and with all of these other incredible jazz musicians. And we used to do jam sessions over at McCoy Tyner's house, or his mom had a hair salon and we used to do jam sessions on the second floor of the salon and all these different things, these incredible stories. And they're not just like local jazz lore or history or Philadelphia heritage. It's like just American heritage. And
it's such a rich heritage.
And these aren't the people who have gone on to be, the Ella Fitzgeralds or the Dizzy Gillespie's. Those are a handful of jazz musicians in America. Jazz in America is propelled and has been propelled forward by all of these local heroes that inspire the next generation of that tight crop of younger artists who break through to a national level. And these are the people who hold all of the history, all of the knowledge of the music. And it's a shame, when those people pass away, you lose all of it because they haven't been properly documented. And one of my ambitions is to find a way to document them, not just their stories, but their likeness, like photographs. And how can you do this in a way that makes sense? And how can this be something that is fundable? And, it's funny. I've had a conversation with Wynton Marsalis about this. When I was applying for a position at Jazz at Lincoln Center, I made it all the way through the ranks of interviews until I got to him, and he eventually told me that I wasn't going to get the job. He was just like, no, get it.
It's like that's the deep cut.
Yeah. But we actually ended up talking on the phone for a long time about this topic, and we shared some thoughts back and forth. And I think I'm at the point now where I want to use this position that I'm in at Mid-Atlantic Arts to find a way possibly to fund initiatives, maybe start regionally and then grow beyond that, create a new program that maybe we can use our resources to find funding for and hopefully kick off more of this sort of thing where we're capturing these stories. I mean, these people who are the architects of this music or who have performed with the architects of this music or grew up with the architects of this music are in their mid to late 80s now. And I definitely feel like I have to do it, like this urgency. But I also recognize that you could just do it. And once you're already in the flow of doing it, then you can find the other programs and the funding and the things, whatever you need to do. But I also recognize that you also don't have many bites at the apple, so to speak. And oftentimes when you're working with these artists, you got one chance to kind of get in there and do it and record a conversation. Yeah. So it's good to go in prepared and not just sort of rush in with, like, all right, well, I don't know what's going to happen. How can you go in focused and knowing that I'm going to use this in several different ways?
Yeah.
But I think the most difficult part of it is finding a way to make it a living sort of document that isn't just for research or something, or that's going to sit in an archive somewhere and that's it. There's a ton of those. There were different initiatives in the past where the jazz greats were documented and interviewed and all of that, but they're just sitting in archives. So what can you do? What can anyone do if they're interested in this to make this thing digestible and useful to the field,
to put fresh air into it so that it feels like something that, I don't know, the idea that something gets archived right away already seems like it's something that belongs in the past. But what I find most amazing about the differences between our disciplines is that, and I mean, there are, I think, many, many reasons for this that we don't really have time to go into, but in the classical music world, everyone's documented. Everyone's always being lifted up as this is the great pedagogue of our time. This is the great soloist. And there's ample information everywhere about people. But also in the world of jazz, like it's primarily this living art that happens in a club, in a jam session that is never replicated again forever. Like, you know, Joshua Bell will go out and play his Mendelssohn, and it'll evolve over time as he gets older and understands more about the music, whatever. But he's going to play the same piece over and over and over and over again for the rest of his life. Whereas these musicians, if they never get a recording contract and they never get proper recognition for what they're doing, it's just this art that goes away. It's like such a temporary thing. And that is a challenge to document, I think, in a way that is accessible.
Like the accessibility aspect of it all is what really is important.
Yeah.
You know, why would someone who knows nothing about jazz interact with this thing? And that's really where the hard work has to come in. Mm-hmm. How can you make this accessible? Mm-hmm. So as my tenure at Mid-Atlantic Arts grows, I hope to be able to kick off something there. But I have gone out to record interviews and bought equipment just so that I can do it and start toying with different sort of functional ways of storytelling. Mm-hmm. I think ultimately the way you're going to get an audience is through storytelling and finding creative ways.
You know what's great for that? Podcasting. I'm envisioning a series about jazz legends with like This American Lifestyle production where you work in the conversations, you play some of their music, you talk to people in their lives.
So that's what I would like to do. Yeah. More or less, hopefully short episodes as a place to start. When I began this process, my goal was to film and either film interviews, but then I began looking around at the different sort of ways that people are filming, and it's like, man, you could be more narrative. You could take like a more narrative focused approach to this. So then I came across this one great video about a local drummer here in New York, older drummer, and it was so artfully done. And I reached out, I just cold emailed the director. It was for the New Yorker, and I found who the director was, and I sent an email to him, you know, just asking a bunch of questions. And I was like, man, can you get on the phone? And to my surprise, he said yes. And we got on the phone and we just began talking about the art of storytelling and the different ways. And the way, much like what you just said, you know, he was like, I could see this being a podcast. Why go through the trouble of capturing this on video? The learning curve for podcasting is going to be much lower for you than video work, you know?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Hey, if we can do it.
yeah, that's true. If we can figure this out, but anybody can.
but in that regard, there are a lot of great examples of podcasts. And I'm just like, man, why would I want to enter that space that is occupied by great podcasts that have been established, you know, like this podcast? But for me to come from scratch and to say, okay, well, I'm just going to show up with this thing and, you know.
But it's just a platform. It's just like anything else. To me, that's the same as asking, like, why release an album? All these other musicians release albums all the time. Like, you have something unique to say and can be found. And I also think it has been a jumping off point for something that then gets expanded based around the themes of that podcast, right? So like the concept of starting there and having the narrative and capturing people's attention in their cars or on their bus ride or whatever, and then growing to that point where you can then turn it into a filmed style thing where you get to see their faces and everything. Like, that's my personal opinion about that, because otherwise we probably would not have started a podcast either.
Yeah.
Because by the time you start, you know, even just every once in a while, I'll talk to somebody out in the world who doesn't know that I do this. Just the other week, I was talking to somebody and they were like, oh, you know, back in the day, like before the pandemic, I think I was listening to a podcast for freelancers. And I was like, yeah, there's more than one. Mm-hmm. It's okay. I mean, even within the limited scope of podcasts for freelance musicians, we all speak differently. We all have different perspectives that we're sharing out there. So it's just adding another human element to the world of podcasts, right?
For sure.
Now we've given you your pep talk. Now you can go do it.
Now go do the thing. I'm sure you have lots of extra time.
Yeah.
Actually, also, you have a friend who can, I can help you.
Oh, well, there you go.
I'm just saying.
Listen, it's funny that you were talking about that sort of like kismet thing that happens. And like the whole Red Barat thing was all 100% a function of kismet and like the universe conspiring.
How did that come about? I have to hear this story.
So, okay, I guess I'll just leave you with this thing. I left Temple, and part of my plan when I decided to like refocus on music at Temple was to just keep going up to New York while I was at school. And maybe it'll pay off by the time I graduate. So I just kept going up to New York at the Vanguard. And every time I went, I would stay, I would hang, I would talk to everyone, to the point where they all just knew my name. And right after I graduated from Temple, I got a call for my first gig in New York. It was a week-long recording at the Blue Note. It was a live recording for Charles Tolliver. And it became the album Emperor March. So, that was my very first gig in New York, like this week-long stint. And I'm just like, wow, I need to move to New York. So I moved to New York. I didn't have any money. I somehow through, I found some Craigslist ads for sublets or whatever, and I figured it out. And I would kind of run out of money, then go back to Philly or whatever. And the last time I did that, I just got off the Chinatown bus back to Philadelphia from New York. And I'm walking past the Lowe's Hotel. And I see in a window, there was a piano player named Anthony Wanzi who had just finished playing a show with Joanna Pascal. So I walk in and I was like, hey, man, how are you? And he asking me, what I was up to. And I was like, I just got back from New York. I'm looking for another apartment now, otherwise I'm going to have to stay, in Philly. And he was like, a friend of mine was just telling me that she's looking for a roommate. Maybe I can connect you with her. It'll be affordable. And she's a friend. And I was like, cool, connect us. And he did. And I ended up moving into that apartment. And it was in Brooklyn in Park Slope. And, it's just like I got that little extra lifeline to keep me in New York a little bit longer. Eventually, I kind of burn out because I'm going out every single night. Like I'm playing 3-4 jam sessions a night. I'm just going, and I'm traveling everywhere, trying to find jam sessions, trying to find places to sit in, just doing it. And I finally get to the point where I'm like, okay, at the end of this week, I'm leaving New York and I'm going to go move back to Philly and figure things out.
You surrendered. You're like, I surrendered.
Yeah, I think I'm ready to go back,
Yeah.
So my last gig in New York, I was at this place called the Brooklyn Lyceum, which happened to be around the corner from where I was living. I leave my house to go to the show. And as I'm leaving my house and walking down the street, I pass this guy on his cell phone and he's like walking towards me. And, I see him kind of rushing off the phone and he looks like he's about to approach me. And I'm like, oh, God, like New York, it's some New York shit is about to happen, And this guy's like, yo, man, you play trombone? And I'm like, yeah, I play trombone. He was like, okay, cool. Who do you play with? And, we started talking. It's like a typical conversation you might have. Like people ask you about what's in your case all the time.
Yep,
sure.
So the guy's like, yeah, well, I have a band and maybe I can get you to come in and play with us one day. And I'm like, again, you hear that a million times, whatever. We exchange information and we just like go our separate ways. I go to my gig and I end up leaving New York. Like a year later, I get this Facebook message and it's that guy. And he's like, yo, man, you remember me? We ran into each other on the street. Listen, I have a couple of dates that I could use a trombone player for. If you want to do them, let me know. And if it works out, I have a couple more. And I go to Brooklyn to play these shows. And all of a sudden, I'm in this cat's band. It was Red Barat. But the wild thing about it is that day that I was walking down the street with my trombone, he was on the phone with his trombone player who was telling him that he just got a tour and he's not going to be able to make any more dates with the band. So he's getting this cook and up the street, walking directly towards him is a trombone player.
I didn't know this story either. Yeah. This is so
is a trombone player, and that's why when he sees me coming, he like hangs up the phone and he's like, yo man, you play trombone?
He was lucky too.
Yeah, and that began like I traveled the world with those guys. Like I traveled the world with them, and it's just if I left my apartment like 3 minutes later, I would have missed them.
Unbelievable.
Or if I would have walked on the other side of the street, or like any of these things, it's just one of these like very special, magical New York things that can happen.
Totally.
Synchronicity.
And yeah. So I mean, everything just hinged on that one weird moment and interaction, and I'm all the better for it.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing to me. Honestly, I just think like life flows like that.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it happens so much more than we even realize on a daily basis. We don't notice it most of the time, but every once in a while you have these moments where you're like, okay, I mean, that's unexplainable. That's
Absolutely.
Unexplainable. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's a crazy thing. Amazing. That's such a great story. I'm glad we stayed
on that, ladies and gentlemen.
This has been such a great conversation.
This has been amazing, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so glad.
It's been great to meet you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening today. If you loved this episode, consider writing us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, or wherever you listen.
Thanks also to our season sponsor, Potter Violins.
If you'd like to support the podcast and get access to bonus content, consider joining our Patreon community.
You can buy all your musician-centric merch, including shirts, water bottles, koozies, and a variety of other fun items.
Our theme music was written and produced by JP Wogeman and is performed by Steph and myself.
Our episodes are produced by Liz O'Hara and edited by Emily McMahon.
Thanks again for listening. Let's talk soon.